Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on Canadian Innovators. I'm Jocelyn Bamford. On the program, we're going to celebrate Canadian entrepreneurs, hear their stories on how their companies were invented, and learn about innovation and growth. Small and medium-sized business are the lifeblood of the Canadian economy. In fact, 92% of all businesses in Canada have 100 employees or less. These companies have been hammered over the last 10 years with uncompetitive policies from all levels of government, from the green energy policy to taxes like carbon tax and the proposed clean fuel standards tax. These costs make it extremely uncompetitive to operate in Canada, leaving many Canadian innovators with difficult decisions. Today, we are going to meet two of these innovators. With me today are Shalini Seeth of Surati Sweets, an amazing growing Indian baked goods company, and Peter Gossman from the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada. Let's hear about both companies and their genesis. Let's start with Shalini.
So my grandfather started Surati Sweet Mart in Uganda, Africa in the 1940s. And it was a family business from the very beginning. And through the Idi Amin expulsion, my father came to Canada as a refugee, and the rest of the family went to India. Slowly, he started to bring the family over, including my grandfather, who came in the dead of winter in February, got bored out of his mind, and needed something to do. So people realized that there was a lot of Indian people who ended up in Canada through this expulsion. So they found out my grandfather was in Canada, started to ask him to make some of the specialty foods he used to make in Uganda. And they say the rest is history. My father, my uncle saw a need, and we started with a small manufacturing plant in Keele Street by York University. We now are working out of a 65,000 square foot facility in Scarborough, Ontario. And we just recently have started to look at manufacturing in this state of Ohio. So we employ about 200 people full-time with distribution centers across the US. I'm third generation to join. So the entrepreneurial spirit really started with my grandfather, and we've all just been lucky and blessed that it's gone through the generations. So we're hoping to keep that legacy alive and continue to grow.
That's an inspiring story, Shalini. And for those of you who have not tried Surati snacks, they're available in most grocery stores, and their pistachio cookies are the best in the planet. They're amazing. So now, Peter, tell me about your company. You two have a great story, so let's hear about that.
Oh, hello, Jocelyn and Shalini. What a great story that was. I have to follow that up now. So, many entrepreneur immigrants have come to this country. My parents were also immigrants here, and my father started a business. And I ended up in that business on my own as a mold maker. I've been in the plastics business for 40 years, and had started my first company when I was 25 years old. Since then, many changes, but I decided to move from the mold making industry to injection molding 15 years ago, and acquired a company together with a partner. And that was a company that was in dire straits at the time, and it had 40 employees. We kind of rescued that company. And the part that I guess is difficult when you're starting a new venture and you're trying to rehabilitate a company is that you need support from the financial institutions, from government, from everywhere. And it seemed okay at the beginning in 2007. However, green energy policies of Ontario kind of took over, and slowly but surely we began to drown in energy costs. When we first started the company, took the company over actually, because it was started in the 50s, but we took it over. We were paying $15,000 a month for hydro consumption that within a short 8 years went from $15,000 a month to $55,000 a month. And that got us thinking. And as Shalini just mentioned, we also started to think about what opportunities there would be in better jurisdictions where hydro was at a reasonable cost. Ontario at that point had probably the highest rates for industrial rates.
Now, I'm going to stop you there, Peter, because we're going to get into that right after the break. So I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and we'll be back with our innovators. Welcome back. You're watching Canadian Innovators, and I'm Jocelyn Bamford. And with me are two entrepreneurs to share their story. Shalini Seith of Surati Sweets and Peter Gossman from the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Business of Canada. Now, Peter, let's get back to the thought that we had. We were talking about electricity before we went to break. So take it away from your thought there, Peter, on the comparison of electricity in Canada and in other jurisdictions.
Well, it's very important as a business to get support to be able to be competitive. And mostly businesses like to be left alone. But when you have policies that come from government that start to impact your ability to compete around the world, you have to start looking elsewhere. And we did do that, effectively started the process in 2015. And by 2018, we had expanded into the US, as many businesses have considered and will consider in the future. The incentives there, we'll probably get into that, but I'll let you go.
Okay, so you both made the difficult decision to relocate your growth into the United States. I'm hoping you might walk us through those decisions and how you were treated by the states when they courted your company. So Shalini, let's start with you. I know you have a great story there.
Yeah, so as Peter mentioned, you need a lot of support. The entrepreneurial spirit, the drive only takes you so far. And if you don't have the support through government regulations, legislation, finance backing, that growth can only take you so far. You have a great product, you have the customer base, but to be able to compete on a global scale, you need all of these things to come together and support you. And unfortunately, in our story, we had that support to a degree. We had the drive, we had the product, we had the team, we had the financial partners. And unfortunately, government did not step up to the plate for us. Not everyone knows our story, and I won't get too much into it, but we're a food manufacturing company. We are in an industrial lot, backs onto residences, and that's what you're going to start seeing in a lot of these urban settings in terms of zoning. Well, all the onus was put on business. You can't make noise. Well, we ship. You can't emit emissions. We have exhaust fans. They're not toxic or anything like that. And it was just an ongoing issue with the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Economic Development, and we just felt we weren't getting the support we needed. And as we started to grow, we started to look at other jurisdictions at the same time. And I call it my US trip. And I really just went to states to see what is out there as our US growth was taking off tremendously at that point. And let's just say the business environment in which they want to succeed and want you to succeed is exactly kind of what Peter said. Leave businesses to do what they know what to do. Support in terms of, yes, there has to be laws, there has to be regulations, there has to be fair wage and all of that, but it has to be sustainable. You can't continue to increase minimum wage and then increase the costs that go along with it in terms of carbon tax, electricity prices, hydro, and everything else. Because at some point, businesses will run out of money and their margins dry up. When margins dry up, they don't have the finance means to go back and reinvest in the business, into new technology, which is what we need to compete. And that's part of the decision that we made to move that growth into the US. We will continue to work in Canada, in our Toronto plant, but in order for us to really compete with the Indias of the world, which is our biggest competitor, we needed to make that decision. It was not an easy decision to make.
So Shalini, tell me about the attitude of the folks that were courting you, the business community in the United States. tell me about, quickly, because we only have 1 minute left before we go to break, and then we're going to get to Peter. Tell me about your experience with just the attitude of trying to attract business into the United States.
I think the first part of that is they treat that economic development in their government as a business. So they look for efficiencies. They have a lot of people who were in business or in the business related fields. So they know exactly what manufacturers or what we need. So they already have a plan put in place. Exactly what Peter said, regulations, energy pricing. They know energy is a huge part of manufacturing anywhere you go. So they look to ensure that you're getting, through cooperatives and stuff like that, where you're getting the lowest price possible.
Welcome back. We're back to our segment. Peter, why don't you share with me your experience and what you found when you were looking at relocating some of your growth to the United States?
I think the big question here is, how is the U.S. so much more effective at attracting business than we are here in Canada? And that's what you were alluding to. There are a lot of factors, and I boiled it down to this, that there's always a regional focus in the U.S. Each region is concerned about providing jobs for the people in that area. So they put their resources together to try to attract people region by region, and they compete with each other. Here in Canada, we rely on either the provincial government or federal government for a few trickle-down programs, and they can't really do that effectively from that high level. So you have financial incentives, you have tax deferrals, and a big one that I found is that there is education married with business there. So they actually approach you and say, look, you need certain skills in this area in your business. Can we help incorporate that into our school system? And that's a big part that we're missing here.
Absolutely. Now I'd like to focus on the most important segment, I think, of our discussion today. And that's, what advice would you have for the politicians at all levels in order to both attract and to maintain businesses here in Canada? So Peter, why don't you go first and give us your advice for the politicians out there that may be listening on what you would do to keep businesses here, because that keeps jobs here, and that's really what it's all about, is keeping jobs here in Canada.
Well, here's I guess, an overreaching comment, and that is that politicians have to stop looking at ideological ways of getting votes and look at what's absolutely necessary for the economy of the country, because there is nothing more important than the economy. Politicians today focus on many what I call soft issues, and we all know what they are, and they bring out emotions in the voters, and whether the candidate is pretty or handsome. These things are all soft issues that politicians don't focus on, and voters also have to realize that when they're listening to the policies of politicians, that they need to hear what it is they're saying, and they have to focus on the economy. In Canada, we have to get back to promoting our oil and gas industry, because it is the cleanest in the world. It actually contributes to the ecology and in the environment. If we export our natural resources, we will help clean up the planet. People have to understand that. And my business being in the plastics, there is this push against plastics, and plastics is the single best material for its use, has the lowest carbon footprint, and people have to understand that. And so when politicians come up with rhetoric and messages that are designed to reach people's emotions, they're doing the wrong thing. They need to have actual fiscal policy that addresses the economy first and foremost above everything else. And my advice to both politicians and to the people that vote for them is listen to what they're actually saying and focus on the economy.
Absolutely. I think, from a political perspective, they really need to debrief, don't they, with businesses like yours that have made the difficult decision to relocate growth, because that growth could be here. Those are jobs that we could have here in Canada. Shalini, I'm going to turn to you. We only have about a minute and 20 seconds before we go to break, but maybe you could give your first piece of advice and then we'll come back to it after the break.
It's exactly what Peter said. Really listen to the politicians, need to listen to us. And when I see us, I mean all forums of business. Yes, we need social programs. Taxes pay for those. Well, how do you pay for taxes? You need to work. So I think when you get the economy going, it actually has that trickle-down effect in terms of low crime rates, shoot-off jobs, education, and everything else. So once you have a sustainable economy, sustainable policies that support the economy, you will see all of the other things come into place. So really let businesses do what we need to do and help us do that.
Absolutely. I think that when we come back from the break, I'd like you folks to think about the impact of affordable energy on your business and the impact of taxes. We've touched a little bit on that. I'd like to dig a little deeper into that. And maybe you can contrast the difference between affordable energy here in Canada and affordable energy in the United States. And then we'll just talk about the ecosystem on how businesses work together. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's get right back into it. Before the break, we were talking about the attraction and the incentives in the United States to relocate your growth there, and what could be done to stop this flow of great Canadian innovators that are relocating elsewhere. So Shalini, I'd like you to just talk about affordable energy and the impact on your business and what you saw as the difference between Canada and as you relocate your growth to the United States.
Well, I think from the very beginning, I had heard, to be honest with you, that their energy prices are a lot cheaper in the U.S. and south of the border. When we actually started to get into our consumption, believe it or not, it was a 70% reduction from the energy that we pay, what we pay for energy here in Ontario versus what we are going to be paying. And our consumption, we were anticipating for it to go up. Now, everyone knows food and beverage margins are always very low. The supply chain is very complex. So when you have that kind of savings, the only way, like I said, we can compete is going into automation and stuff like that. So those savings will generate more jobs, will generate new technology for us. The carbon tax is another one. We have our own fleet of trucks. We use natural gas. One of the things I think when we see all of these policies and things coming down is, what is the end game for this? When I heard about carbon tax, I think my first question was, well, what does that mean? And what do they want to do with this? And what are they hoping to achieve by introducing this? Because it's not helping us grow. It's not helping the environment from what I can see. It's not, so that's kind of where it's all these added costs. Just, we say death by 1,000 cuts. And that's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah, and the tragedy of all of this, before I get to you, Peter, is that when they bring in things like carbon tax and clean fuel standards, and they're telling us it's for a cleaner planet, what it does is it leads to a dirty planet, doesn't it? Because businesses go to other jurisdictions that don't have the environmental protection that we have here in Canada. And that leads me back to Peter, if you want to talk just for a quick minute, because we have about 2 minutes left, on the ecosystem that is the resource sector in Canada and its impact and on manufacturing. So walk us through that, if you could.
That's exactly the right term. The entire economic picture in Canada is an ecosystem, and we're all interdependent on everybody else. When you stop the oil and gas industry from producing, there is countless businesses that supply that, from the people that make the pipelines, the people that make the equipment for the pipelines, that work for all of these industries. It affects everything from the machining industry to farming to everything else. So when we have a chance here to do something right, because Canada has a lot of great companies and a lot of great innovators. We can keep them here if we can support that effort, and that effort to shut down businesses affects every other. We destroy a whole pile of valuable resources by just throwing them into landfills, where we could be properly, with the proper motivation from government, to recycle that, creating jobs, creating a new economy based on reusing what we already have. Instead, we want to take plastics and say, let's just not use plastics. And the alternative to that is to use aluminum or glass or all these other products that are far more worse for the environment. And plastics is a very valuable resource that can be put back into the economy and create jobs. So really, the other big part of this too is the education system, that we get industry together with the universities and work together, because we've got the brain power, we've got the people in this country, and we need to utilize that.
Absolutely. And I want to thank both of you. We're running out of time today. Great conversations. Thank you both for joining us today. And that's all the time we have.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
We had Peter and Shalini today on Canadian Innovators talking about their great companies and success stories. And we really need to make sure that we're keeping our great Canadian innovators here in Canada, because that's keeping jobs here in Canada. And a lot of them are middle-class jobs in manufacturing. Those are high-paying, high-skilled jobs, and we need to keep and preserve them here in Canada. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and we'll see you next time.